Hari Om.
Hari Om, Jim. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I am good. Finally beginning to feel normal, actually.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it feels good, honestly. This is my third day of full energy, or almost full energy. And yesterday I even took a yoga class, so that was
Sweet. Om. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata cha Pita, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Twameva Vidya Dravinam, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Deepa, what verse are we on?
I think we stopped at 24 last time, Jim.
All right, let me turn my phone off. All right, would you help us out, please?
Sure. Do you want me to read 24 or 25?
Read the English of 20. Did we do 24 last time?
I think so, but I'm not sure if we completed it. So I'm going to read it out.
All right.
Okay, yeah. This self cannot be cut nor burned, nor moistened, nor dried up. It is eternal, all-pervading, stable, immovable, and ancient.
All right.
You did.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Was there more to the end? Did I interrupt you?
No, I said you did cover all of it, though.
All right. All right, next one.
Okay. Avyaktoya machintyoya mavikaryoya muchyate tasmadevam viditvenam nanushochitu marhasi. This self is said to be unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchangeable. Therefore, knowing this to be such, you should not grieve.
So again, we're still dealing with the question or the teaching that came up in verse 11. You grieve for whom you should not grieve, though you speak words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead, which is harsh teaching, but we have to dig deep into it. So what Vyasa is giving us here in these verses, these are meditation verses. What's a meditation verse? Well, let's first of all describe what it's not. When you and I start talking about the self, and we externalize it as an intellectual concept, like we're going to talk about the Constitution, or we're going to talk about the Supreme Court, or we're going to talk about the Catholic Church. That's something other than you and me. If we start to discuss the self of it as if it's something other, it will do nothing to free us. So in a meditation verse, we have to start with who we are. Now, you don't have a bunch of selves. Some teachings say, oh, I'm getting in touch with my higher self. I'm going to channel my higher self, or psychologists saying, I want you to talk to the 6-year-old. Now talk to the 12-year-old and stuff like that. Vedanta says there may be value in all that, but spiritually, let's go to our direct experience. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. When you refer to yourself, I, me, that's yourself. Now, in the state of ignorance, what I do is superimpose upon a direct experience ideas of self. The technical term is jiva bhavana. Bhavana means feelings or attitudes or ideas. So they're the ideas that I have about myself, the stories. What we want to do is in our meditation, we might start with chanting our mantra for a while. Why? Just to quieten the mind or be with your breath. Why? To quieten the mind. And then we're practicing this subject-object discrimination. When we talked about these levels of our spiritual anthropology, we want to discriminate between the self and the not self. So when you were a child, you had a little body. You went through adolescence, your body changed. Now you're an adult, your body has changed again. But have you not been aware of the changes in the body? Take a deep breath, feel the breath in the body. See, you know the body like you know a jar. It's an object of awareness. You are not your body. You are the knower of your body. And it's the same with my feelings. Whatever I'm feeling, joy, sorrow, anxiety, fear, etc. Whatever the feelings are, even if they're intense, they still are objects of awareness. I'm not my feelings. We go to the realm of the intellect, have all these ideas. The ideas go by like your hand in front of your face. And I know all the thoughts. I know the thoughts. So what we want to begin to inquire into is, who is it who knows all this stuff? So in the space between our thoughts, with this radical introversion of the attentive faculty, see if you can begin to intuit, apprehend, get a sense of, who am I? Now it's tricky because it's like trying to look at your eyes. Nobody has ever seen their eyes. It's like trying to taste your tongue. It's like trying to shine a flashlight on its own batteries. You will never see yourself as an object. The self is not an experience that you're going to have. In fact, you're having it right now. Are you not you? But we want to discard all the koshas, the coverings, the upadis, the equipments, and see if we can get a sense of what's pure self. Who am I? And the scriptures give us two kinds of meditations. We have the meditations of negation. It is not this. It is not this. Usually that's referred to in the scriptures as neti neti, na iti, not this. Then we have the assertive verses. They do not define, they only point. And in our meditation, in a quiet mind, we take each one of these ideas. Check out yourself. See whether or not it's true about you. So let's take each one of these ideas, and as we go through them, in a quiet mind, while you're listening to class tonight, with your attention turned inward, notice yourself. See whether or not it's true. So what's the first idea, Deepa?
Unmanifest.
Yes, avyaktaha. So anything that's manifest, I can be aware of. Oh, there it is, I see it. It's manifested. So yourself never shows up as a manifestation. When we see artistic pictures of Lord Krishna, he's frequently seen to be blue. But actually, what does his name mean? What does the word Krishna mean? Anybody know?
The
Black.
color of the dark rain clouds, dark skinned, basically.
Just black? Shveta Krishna. White, black. So the inference here is yourself is not manifest. When you look behind your eyes and notice the knower, there's no thing there. It's not like you're going to see a little gray ball with wings or something like that. There's nothing there. It is avyaktaha. It's Krishna. What's the next word, please, Deepa?
Unthinkable.
Achintyam, is that what it is?
Yes.
Achintyam. We talked about this before. I think in Hindi, chintya means worry. In Sanskrit, it just means thinking. So all my ideas about the self are not it. It's kind of like this. So either you or maybe your kids are getting ready to get married. And the parents are starting to arrange a meeting between, let's say you have a son and a nice girl. And they say, well, she's 5'4" and she has beautiful long hair and she has almond-shaped eyes and she's got wheat-colored skin and she comes from a good family and she's got a lovely figure and she's got a good vocation. She's a doctor. Well, this is good marriage material. But the boy, it's just ideas. Thinking about the girl until he meets her. Can't even talk. So nervous. So you see, the ideas are not the real thing. So all the ideas we have about Brahman, all the ideas we have about the self, actually the self is achintya. And to know it directly, we have to practice turning down the frequency and the volume of thought. This is what happens in meditation. Till we can begin to have space between the thoughts. And it's in that thoughtlessness that the pure nature of the self becomes evident. It is achintya. Next idea.
Unchangeable.
On what?
Unchangeable.
Unchangeable. Is it achalam or what's the word in Sanskrit?
Avikaryu.
Avikarya. Okay. So it doesn't move, it doesn't change. So, this self is cheap. I went and looked inside in meditation, it was all bright light. The next time it was all darkness. The third time, I fell asleep. This can't be the self. It keeps changing. No. Your self never changes. Now, what's important about this? As we're functioning in our lives, and events happen, we get our allotted dose of praise and censure, success and failure, honor and dishonor. And each of these, if we stop for a moment, again have this radical reversal of our attention. Notice the knower. Yep, myself, it's still nothing there. No me. It hasn't changed. I meditated today and it was a little pig heart in there. No, it never happens. If you see a little pink heart, and the teacher says, and who saw the little pink heart? Oh, I did. You're not the little pink heart. Oh, Jim, I was in meditation and I was feeling the Kundalini. Oh, I'm glad. And who was it? Who was aware of the Kundalini? Oh, that was me. Drop it. You are the unchanging awareness. Next idea.
Jim, there's a word in Sanskrit, but not in English. It says amuchyate, but it doesn't have an equivalent translation.
Muchyate. I don't know what that means. Do you?
No, no.
Does
But I
any
looked.
of our Sanskritists know? I'm sorry, it's not a word I know.
Okay. The next idea is, therefore, knowing this to be such, you should not grieve.
Yes, so the idea here is not only will nothing ever touch me, but even my loved ones and my enemies, though the body dies, nothing touches the self. If I have a pleasant dream, does it touch me, the waker? No. If I have a nightmare, does it touch me, the waker? No. So also this long dream of this world, in reality, never touches consciousness. Next verse.
Let me bring up the Kindle. I didn't do that last time.
Jim, can I ask you a quick question?
Please.
So you mentioned that in meditation, we experience some space between thoughts. So what exactly, I mean, you obviously experience some momentary bliss during that time between thoughts. So what exactly is happening behind the scenes? Is it consciousness experiencing itself? Because you said you cannot know the self. So what exactly is happening in meditation during the space
Okay.
between thoughts?
Well, first of all, let's define Ananda as no sorrow reaches there. In the beginning, that's a more useful definition because I don't want people to start thinking of the self as some emotional state. So let's just define Ananda as no sorrow reaches there. You're like the center of a cyclone. Now it's empty and it's vast. And when the mind is stupefied into that silence, it becomes very blissful, very peaceful. But what you've started to touch on is what is it that knows the self? So we know everything in the world through what we call the triputi, the triple factor. So I look over and I see the glass. I, the knower, through seeing, cognize the glass, object of knowledge. I hear the traffic outside. I, the knower, through hearing, cognize the traffic noise. I can go through the 5 outer senses. I, the knower, through manas, mind, know feelings and judgments, objects of knowledge. I, the knower, through buddhi, cognize thoughts, images. How do you know you are you? Do you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell yourself? No. Do you emote yourself? No. Do you think yourself? No. But do you exist? Well, of course I do. I'm me. How do you know it? I don't know. I just am. Yes. The self is its own means of knowledge. There is no triple factor when it comes to direct self-experience. I is the knower, I is the means of knowledge, I is that which is known, not as an object, by me. And the great, great cosmic truth is we always have it. But in the subtle intellect, I have all this confusion. That's all that needs to be cleared up. We need to get rid of the dross of all the video in my head, the rationalizing discursive intellect. So I just have what's left over. It's that pure experience. Aham, aham, aham. Did that make it a little clearer?
So is it accurate to describe that bliss as the consciousness experiencing itself, getting a taste of itself?
No. When you use a word like taste, it's as if something is acquired. The self is beyond all experiences. We call the self bliss absolute, Ananda, because when the mind is free from all its struggle and comes home, we have the experience that the scriptures call Atmaramana. The mind can revel in the self. The self has no agency. It's the mind that does. It's the mind that experiences positive and negative things. It is the self that's witnessing your misery. And when the mind becomes quiet, it is the self that witnesses the quiet mind. So the tasting happens in the mind. Now, the self doesn't have any problems. Where do my problems occur? In my mind. So Yoga Vasishta says, both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. There is no other bondage than the deeply rooted conviction I'm bound, meaning I think I'm my body, or I think I'm my body plus my personality, or my body plus my body. There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction in the intellect through direct experience. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. Once the subtle intellect sees the futility of struggle, the unreality of any personal sense of self, the unreality of all thought, the dreamlike nature of the phenomenal world, it quits throwing up all this suffering when it comes home. All right, next verse.
It's two verses together, Jim, so I'll go with
All
both.
right.
Atha chainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tathapi tvam mahabaho naivam shochitumarhasi jatasya hi जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युर्ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्माद् परिहार्येऽर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि. But even if you think of him as being constantly born and constantly dying, even then, O mighty armed, you should not grieve. Indeed, certain is death for the born, and certain is birth for the dead. Therefore, over the inevitable, you should not grieve.
So now Krishna says, if you cannot grasp this eternal nature of the self, and you are identified with this subtle body, you see it as being born and dying, meaning it takes up a body, and that dies, and you take up another body. I love what Deepak Chopra says. He says, the opposite of death is not life. The opposite of death is birth. There is no opposite to life. Marvelous. Wonderful thing to meditate on. So, in our spiritual anthropology, if you believe in the doctrine of reincarnation, if you're born, the inevitability of it is you're going to die. Back in the 1980s, when I was working with many young men who had AIDS, and there were others in the class who didn't have AIDS, I coined this phrase: having a physical body is a sexually transmitted condition, and it's always fatal. If you are born, dying of the body is certain. Now, whether or not you believe that certain is birth for the dead can't help you there. Either accept it as a possibility or not. It's not necessary. If you don't want to get involved in the doctrine of reincarnation, just know that in this lifetime, every experience, every job, every relationship, every place you live, every moment is born and dies. Don't worry, COVID will pass. How do I know this? Certain is death for the born. Every experience is impermanent. Now, once we grasp this, it doesn't make us want to jump into bed and pull the covers over our heads. Quite the contrary. Cherish your life because it's over all too soon. This is why I love the image of the sunset. So you're in the city and you happen to be driving along the great highway and you stop because the clouds are forming in the west, the sun is going down, and it's a beautiful, glorious San Francisco sunset. And you stay there for 10 minutes. You watch the clouds start to pink and golden and move to purple. Then The sun is this brilliant orb on the horizon, and half an orb, and then a sliver, and then it's gone. 10 minutes. But no one grieves the loss of the sun, because we know how impermanent a sunset is. Or a rainbow. Beautiful. It's so fleeting. Change in the light and it's gone. So is your stock portfolio. So is your figure. So is your job. So is every dimension of politics. And in the end, even your body. So Krishna says, why grieve the inevitable? So a Christian bishop shared this idea with me that I just love. What are we to do? Spend ourselves in love in this life. Just empty it all out. Do it all. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't worry about success. Exhaust your vasanas. Live an intense, full life. In service to the society. In service to something greater than yourself. Than your little ego. That will be a rewarding, meaningful life. And it will be over all too soon, I promise you. So again, we talked about how Krishna teaches from these three levels. So Arjuna was not at this point able to grasp the vision of the absolute. So now Krishna gives him the vision of being identified with the subtle body. Going on, next one.
Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktam dhyani bharata avyakta nidhananyeva tatra ka paridevanam. Beings unmanifest in the beginning and unmanifest again in their end seem to be manifest in the middle, O Bharata. What then is there to grieve about?
So this is the truth of all form. It can be inert form like a table or a chair. It can be forms like animals, people, and things like that. First, we have a condition called prior non-existence. Prior non-existence is avyaktaha, unmanifest. Prior non-existence is beginningless, but it has an end. So, I bought a set of these red glasses about 10 years ago. So, before they were made, say 10 years ago, for how long didn't they exist? It's the beginning of time. They didn't exist. And some glassmaker made them 10 years ago. So the prior non-existence ended. And now we have vyaktaha, manifestation. The glass exists. I used to have 6 of the small ones. and 6 of the tall ones. I only have 1 of the tall ones left. Guess what happened to the other 5? I broke them. So they moved from the dimension of the manifest into subsequent non-existence of the unmanifest. Subsequent non-existence has a beginning, but no end. When did I break the last one? Oh, about 2-3 years ago. That's when non-existence for it began. How long will it cease to exist? For the rest of eternity. Vyaktaha, unmanifest, manifest, unmanifest. Prior non-existence, momentary existence, subsequent non-existence. Anything with a form goes through this process without exception. Don't believe me? Look to your direct experience. I was on the phone with a dear friend. We're both old car buffs. And we were kind of yakking with each other about all the cars we've had. So we were online. And, you can Google the year and make of a car and then click images and it'll come up. I said, oh, yeah. I had a 1961 Imperial convertible. It was my Batmobile. So I clicked it. Oh, yeah, Jim, that was a really cool car. Unmanifest now. It's been crunched, I'm sure. Gone. Gone. It's a cool car. Gone. All of them. Houses. Garments. Lovers. Talking with my dear friend Sheila this past week. Sheila is 84. She just got through a bout of COVID-19. She was a sick girl. But she's the oldest of 4 kids, and the 2 middle girls, Eileen and Joan, are gone. Joan died of cancer just a week ago. And we were talking about how for her, all of the cousins are starting to die. Parents' generation, they've been gone a while. But now it's her generation that's starting to pass away. Big family, all of a sudden, they're dropping. It's the inevitability. So again, don't fear it. There's a wonderful Jewish miracle kind of blessing that after someone dies, the prayer is, may their memory be a blessing. I love that. But that's all we had left after a while. It was just the memory. And in another generation, we won't even have that. Do you remember your parents if they've passed? I hope so. Your grandparents, maybe. Great-grandparents, maybe 1 or 2 of you do. Great-great-grandparents, no. No one's alive who knew them. Even the memory is gone. So, this is it. Right here, right now. The fullness of life is in the now. This is not a rehearsal. Hopefully, we won't spend it regretting the past and fearing the future and missing the wonderful intensity of the now. Because it all passes very quickly. All right, next one.
This is the fast-paced verse, Jim. आश्चर्यवत् पश्यति कश्चिदेनम् आश्चर्यवत् वद्वदति तथैव चान्य आश्चर्यवच्चैन मन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वाप्येनं वेद न चैव कश्चित्. One sees this as a wonder, another speaks of this as a wonder, another hears of this as a wonder, yet having heard none, understands this at all.
So we hear this, we speak of it, but we don't understand it. And therefore we fear it. So what frees us from what I call existential fear? It's one of the promises of self-realization. For the woman or the man of steady wisdom who's realized the self, fear of death is gone. And without that, it's all very mysterious. It's all very mysterious. All right, next one.
This is verse 30. Dehi nityamavadho Dehi nityamavadhyoyam Dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitumarhasi. This, the indweller in the body of everyone, is ever indestructible, O Bharata, and therefore you should not grieve for any creature.
So we can look at this verse either from the identification with the subtle body, which is indestructible, but I think he really means the self, which is indestructible. Now, again, understand that this battle, this Kurukshetra, is in your and my life. So the fearlessness that the yogi gets when she sees that I is indestructible. So if you're at work and there's injustice or corruption and you want to speak truth to power, but you're afraid. I don't want to lose my job. I want to just go along with City Hall, keep my head down, do my work. You can do that. But I would ask you the question now, what if you were independently wealthy? What would you do? Would you be so fearful? Oh no, I'd expose the corruption. I'd speak truth to power. And what I say is, but you are indestructible and nothing can harm you. Speak your truth. Oh, Jim, I worry so much about the stock market. It went down 6% the past week. I don't know what it went down. It went down a lot. I'm so frightened. I'm so frightened. Don't worry. You are indestructible. And so ultimately are the ones you love, whether they realize it or not. So it's not just some soldier on the battlefield. It's you and me in our lives. So frequently, it's fear. Fear that I'm going to fall into some abyss. And of course, the great vanity. I'll talk to someone who's, let's say, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old. And I say, well, have you ever slept under a bridge? No. Have you ever gone without a meal because you were hungry or poor? No. Have you ever had not inadequate clothing and frozen to death, out in the cold? No. I said, God's done his job. You've been taken care of for all these years. Well, no, God didn't do it. I did it. Oh, such vanity. You think you're that powerful. Such vanity. No. God is my sharanam, my shelter, my support. I tell people, in truth, I live on cosmic welfare. But we all do, whether we realize it or not. But what shuts off the flow of energy in our life? Fear, egoism, compulsion to control, anger, all those things. Just squeeze the pipe. It's all going to work out because God's in charge and you are indestructible. Whew. That sure made life a lot easier. Noisy cars with booming basses going by. All right, let's do one more.
You're looking at verse 31. Swadharmamapi chavekshya navikam pitumarhasi dharmayathi yudhar shreyo anyat takshatriyasya na vidyate. Further, looking at thine own duty, thou ought not to waver, for there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war.
So the word he's using here is swadharma. Now, the exoteric understanding is that we have particular duties that are ascribed to us given our caste, our station in life. So if you're a Brahmin, you should be a scholar, you should be a priest, you should be have religious duties, this sort of thing. If you're Kshatriya, you should be a warrior or a king or maybe a lawyer. If you're a Vaishya, you should be a merchant, etc. If you're a Shudra, well, you should be just a laborer. We're not talking about those exoteric understandings of Swadharma. We mean the law of our own inner being. As we get into chapter 3, we're going to talk about how important it is to identify what our calling is. What is it that gives me purpose in the world? To learn to love what you do. Someone posted something on Facebook that was just really cool to see. So you can take a drop of water and you can play a particular musical tone, and it causes the drop of water to vibrate. And what they were doing is, if it were a middle C or A or E or F sharp, and the way in which the form of the drop changed because of the note that was being played. So each one was water, but each tone created a unique vibratory form. And I thought, oh, that's such a beautiful metaphor for Swadharma. Because each one of us has a physical body, an emotional life, a thought life, an ego sense, and the self in each of us. That way we're like the water drop, we're all the same. But what is the tone that plays through each one of us? Each one's different. Each one's different. So part of our job is to ride the horse in the direction it's going, to identify what our gifts are, our strengths, to love what we do and to do what we love. Work is the highest form of play. Play is the highest form of work. I can remember when I had my job as a church musician. And we would get a chance at the holidays to hire extra musicians for an orchestra and extra singers for soloists and big productions. And when the services would be over, I can't tell you how many times I would say, I can't believe they pay me to do this. It's so much fun. That's what work ideally should be for us. This is our Swadharma when we're in alignment with it. Now, Krishna is Arjuna rather is a warrior. And nothing is more glorious for a warrior than a righteous war. To get victory and glory and honor. But each of us is different. What's the reward for Swadharma may be different for you. Successful project at work. It can be something simple, like your Swadharma is to be a really good parent, seeing your children succeed. Maybe something very simple, being a really, really good cook. That's what you love. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So here Krishna is saying, now we're going to take it down to the level of the body. So this is your Swadharma. You're a soldier. You like to do battle. Go fight. Go fight. For that reason alone, you should fight. Again, going back to Arjuna's initial problem, he was paralyzed by indecision and could not act. So in this verse, we have just a glimpse of what we're going to talk about in the whole teaching in chapters 3, 4, and 5 on karma yoga. How to enliven and ennoble our activity in the world. So he gave us teaching at 3 levels. Why we should not grieve. Why we should plunge into life. Get our allotted dose of success and failure, gain and loss, joys and sorrows. From the highest, nothing touches me. I am achintyam avyaktaham. Beyond all forms, amritam, deathless. Or if you're identified with the subtle body, if you're thinking, okay, beginning and an end. Everything has a beginning and an end. Don't worry about it. It's the ever repeating cycle. Or if you're just physical, you might as well do what you love because that's all you got. All right, we'll stop there. Do we have any questions before we meditate?
Hi, Jim. This is Vikas. A question, please. So I think it was maybe 2 or 3 classes back when this topic of Swadharma had come up in Q&A, and
Yeah.
somehow Hitler came up, and it was said that Hitler's Swadharma was to be a dictator, and
Yes.
and that stayed in my head for a couple of weeks. It's not sitting well. Why wouldn't his Swadharma simply be, or couldn't it be to be a benevolent leader? Why is it to be a dictator? It's just not sitting.
Because that's what was, because he wasn't.
But that's
what he was a monster.
But that's a story in his head, isn't it?
I wouldn't worry about it since I don't think you're a Hitler kind of guy.
Okay.
You know, what's important is, are you living true to yourself? Are you living a life of authenticity? And maybe I was inarticulate and didn't explain it right.
Okay.
But in God's hands, our worst defects can become assets. In that sense, you're right. You know, Julius Caesar, people might have thought of him as a benevolent tyrant. One can be a dictator and a tyrant and not be evil.
Right. One person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, right? So you get that.
This is why Swamiji was a Marxist in his youth. And then when he became a yogi, he began to see very clearly that it's not just economic structures that's problematic. That is a problem. But if we don't change the quality of people's hearts, you could have, for example, a Marxist structure, a communist structure, and it can be oppressive to people if the people leading it have iniquity in their hearts. But Are you doing what you love? That's the question. Can you live a more authentic life? That's the question.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And, well, we won't go into politics. I don't think now is the time to do that. Good question, though. Very good question. But Swadharma just means the law of my own individual being, what I've been programmed to do, what I do easily and well, and what gives me joy to do. So like when I'm working with young people especially, I ask them this question: if you were independently wealthy, had all the education in the world, all the contacts in the world, and all the talents in the world, what would you be doing with your life? And frequently I'll be dealing with people who, I'll speak specifically about this one young man who was an academic administrator, but what he really wanted to do was sing. He was very talented. So I asked him that question. He didn't miss a beat. I'd sing. So I said, well, why the hell aren't you? Because the end is the means in a different form. If you wait until you're financially secure before you start singing, you may end up 30 years later as a university president and never having sung. Because the end is the means in a different form. If you're working in academic administration, you're just going to get better at academic administration. Why not put your time, your energy, your heart into something you love? That's the great teaching about Swadharma. Is that useful?
Yeah, that made sense. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question about this, Jim?
Please.
Every time we speak of Swadharma, I've been carrying this conception that that you have one Swadharma per life. Is that accurate, or can your Swadharma change as you grow, evolve, and?
Well, mine certainly did. I can't tell you, I've had at least 4 careers in this life. And since I was a young man, I have never worked at a job I didn't love. Ever since I read Karl Marx's essay on alienated labor, a very young man in my early 20s. No point in it. Why should I work this hard to make somebody else a lot of money? I'm going to work this hard and should at least enjoy it. So yes, our Swadharma can change. I don't do music at all anymore. I don't listen to it much. Where it was my profession for a long time, 20 years plus.
And then to reverse engineer all that data, Jim, did you know growing up that you wanted to be a teacher?
No, I just knew I loved God. I still don't necessarily want to be a teacher. I just love talking about the Lord. I loved what Swamiji once said. It's the higher part of my mind talking to the lower part of my mind. And if someone else overhears the conversation and gets value from it, well and good.
Mm. Thanks, Jim.
But the way the way Swadharma unfolds is in the now. Start doing what you love. because the end is the means in a different form. Now, going back maybe 15, 20 years, a little longer, where there really weren't university programs to teach people to do computer programming. But I had friends and computers were coming out and they were learning to write code and stuff like that. And they would spend all their spare time on the computer. They taught themselves how to do this stuff. Maybe more than 20, maybe 30 years now. And when again I was teaching music, one of the things I would observe, I would see a student and I would see, well, do they enjoy practicing? They better enjoy practicing. Or is it all about standing up on the reciting hall and being a diva? You better enjoy practicing, because you're going to have to do a lot of it if you want a music career. Very little subtle things like that. So all we get is the work in life. Thy right is to work alone, never to its fruits. All right, it's 1:15. I've gone over again. If you have questions, write them down, bring them next time. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim. Good night.